to say in all three big cases, 48, 65, 71, it was India was the aggressor. Even in that case, the fact that two countries fight wars doesn't mean that one fights the war to just completely obliterate the other one. Wars are, India and China have fought, had border disputes. No one on either side has ever suggested that one country wants to annex the other, right? There's wars fought between territories or states that are adjacent to one another throughout, the post-Second World War period. In very few cases have these wars or these conflicts been made or has it been suggested by one side that these wars or conflicts reflect an attempt by the other side to completely just wipe the one country off the map. And I think that's the crucial issue here, right?
The element of threat inevitably manifested itself into a real hot war. The 1947-48 Kashmir War was just the first of multiple conflicts that would take place between the now two sovereign states of Pakistan and India. But further disorienting Pakistan was the degree of threat posed by India. Were they out to annihilate Pakistan in its entirety? As the Indian threat actualized itself in the Pakistani mindset, it became palpable that preservation was dependent on foreign military assistance.
And I think this is absolutely ridiculous. There's no threat. There were other things to do. They can't swallow Pakistan. Even if they invaded Pakistan, took it over, imagine what mess they'll be in. Already we are in a mess. And you can imagine what will happen in India. They never thought, in 60 years, they're not aggressed against us. Let's be realistic. We are the ones that have always started fighting.
Even the first so-called Indo-Pak War in 48, which was supposedly over Kashmir, was actually a rebellion of indigenous Kashmiri groups or Punchi groups against the Maharaja, and then Waziristani tribes. That was the first sort of strategic depth ploy that we pulled. The army itself is not properly constituted that it could go and fight a battle.
This 47 war, instead of negotiating with the Maharaja, which we never did very seriously, he might have could possibly have acceded to Pakistan, because India's policy about the ruling princes was very clear. They were going to abolish all states and all the rights of the princes and take over all the states. Pakistan had not defined its policy, and the Maharaja had hoped that possibly if he acceded to Pakistan, Pakistan might let him retain some sort of nominal suzerainty anyway. But we never made any approach to him, never talked to him. Anyway, we launched Lashkars, tribal Lashkars into Kashmir and sent the units of the Pakistan army and officers and men also there. So we started that war also. They didn't take an initiative, but then when we did that, the Maharaja acceded to India. It was after a few days after we launched it.
Present! Command!
An enhanced military arsenal made possible through foreign covenants allowed Pakistan to be at par with the military prowess of India. While that may have been a successful reactionary measure, did it convert Pakistan into a security state? Even if that may be so, did this freshly acquired military strength breed overconfidence whereby Pakistan rationalized it could challenge India in Kashmir? And did the political military intelligentsia make a cataclysmic faux pas by assuming India would not retaliate?
No, I tell you what happened. Pakistan decided to join the PACs. The allies of America, Britain, France, etc. We were in the Baghdad Pact, CENTO afterwards. We were in CETO. We had a military alliance. And as a result of these PACs, we were given equipment that was lacking. planes, tanks, various other things that go with military war machine, so that we were better able to defend ourselves against the threat that had emerged from the east.
Pakistan's movement towards becoming a security-oriented state, looking for alliances with the West, where the purposes of the West were one and the purposes of Pakistan were another, but seeking somehow to reconcile these differing objectives and to suggest that there was a common goal that both wished to achieve. We talked about the fact that, oh, the godless communists are anti-Islam, etc., etc. We really were talking about this. We really were thinking only about the threat from India and what we needed to do to build our capacity.
Now, once we'd gone into that, and once we had got this equipment, and the commitment of the armed forces also, you saw a second phase, and that was the ability to defend ourselves against a possible attack. And don't forget that the Kashmir issue kept boiling all the time in the background. And eventually, in 1965, there was a war. But before that, we were able to demonstrate in the Run of Kutch, and we were able to demonstrate through China's intervention in the northeast frontier region that the Indian forces were not invincible, and that although there were many of them there, in both the Run of Kutch and on the border with China, the Indians didn't come off very well. And I think this helped us feel that we were now able to resist anything that came from their side towards us. Then the 65 war, as I said, that led to nothing. It led to a stalemate.
Objective history contends Pakistan's military rationale was antagonistic, but were Indian intrusions in the affairs of Pakistan further catalysts to constructing the reality of threat between the two countries?
Any university student would have known that if you attack India and Kashmir, India will attack you elsewhere, because India considers Kashmir to be a part of its territory. And militarily, you don't confine the battle where you have been attacked. You counter-attack where you think the enemy is weak. It's common sense, which did not exist in GHQ at that time.
Six years after the 65 war, the two countries were up in arms again. The severance of East Pakistan from the West had a profound effect on the psyche of the nation. As far as Pakistan was concerned, a belligerent India was actively trying to undermine its sovereignty, and it had to be dealt with at all levels of the state. The inevitable politics of fear was simply a natural consequence.
Then where is in the textbook of books of international law that if there is some interference from some other countries, could be, but I think it is a valid point that there was Operation Gibraltar going on, and we were assisting the Kashmiri Mujahideen there. But this was our right. We are a party in a dispute, because then you can also claim the same thing, that India did not accept United Nations resolutions to hold plebiscite, reneged on its pledges that its first Prime Minister made to the people of Kashmir, to Pakistan in a telegram, and to the world community at large when it invaded and occupied Kashmir Valley in October 1948. So it crossed the border, attacked Pakistan. Pakistan was prepared for that. But then more dangerous was India's intervention in East Pakistan. Do you think that in 1971 Pakistan committed aggression against India? No. When it was a civil war conditions, good or bad, and such conditions do exist in many countries around the world. India is fighting insurgencies, has been fighting insurgencies in northeastern states for the past 60 years. Does it give any moral or legal justification to China, to Pakistan, to United States, to any other country to go and assist those people who were fighting against the Union government in those areas. Not at all. Pakistan was dismembered only and only by Indian interventions. It organized that intervention in East Pakistan through Mufti Bani. These are facts. So I think India, in such a very adverse circumstances that Pakistan was facing, of its own making, there's no doubt about that. But it proved that it was an enemy of Pakistan.
Roger, this one going.
As far as I'm concerned, the 71 is very clear to me was a war that was that was a secondary aspect to it. The primary issue was the fact that East Pakistan had felt deprived and marginalized and ignored and had erupted in a nationalist movement a long time in the making. India got involved in the very last couple of weeks when it seemed that things were out of control. Large numbers of refugees, don't forget, started streaming into West Bengal from the Pakistan side. So they had their other concerns. I don't perceive that, as is typically depicted, that the whole war was one in which India completely orchestrated this secession movement and was totally responsible for breaking the country. I think that's vastly exaggerated.
71 was a greater stupidity. I mean, we were fighting in purely military terms. It was a ridiculous operation. We were fighting a lines of communication with as long as from Karachi to the south of France or Italy or Morocco somewhere. I mean, such a long territory, and all going along the coast of India. And we couldn't hope to fight that successfully. It was so stupid. And we launched an attack India launched an attack. We were inviting them. Bengalis were crying for help, asking them for assistance, and we got ourselves involved in an operation. It was, and again, our stupidity, our folly that led us into that catastrophe. There was no need for that.
I think that is a travesty of the facts. That is not correct. Pakistan in 1971 found India intervening in a crisis which led to the breakup of Pakistan. And in fact, I would say that 1971 played a huge role in changing Pakistan's security paradigm, which up until then was one that relied on borrowing power from external alignments to protect itself. Therein lay the pursuit of Pakistan's strategic capability. Of course, it was also triggered by India's pursuit of the nuclear capability.
A history of proxy wars had delineated the relationship between the two countries. The possibility of cross-border hostilities had convinced Pakistan that massive troop deployment at its eastern borders acts as a psychological counter-offensive. The Kargil episode in 1999 is one such example.
You see, why do we blame the army? This is the issue. Who talked of a 1,000-year war with India?
It is more a part of Pakistan than it can ever be with India, with all her eloquence and with all her extravagance with words.
Kashmir Pakistan ka rahega aur Pakistan Kashmir ka rahega.
Irrespective of our size, of our resources, we shall fight to the end.
Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who ran his entire election campaign in 1970 on two planks. Domestic, all power to the people, roti, kapda aur makan, food, clothing and shelter, and foreign policy, confrontation with India, a hard line on India. That's how he swept the Punjab, as you know then. And when he launched the nuclear program was not launched by Field Marshal Ayub Khan, not by Yahya Khan. It was done by a civilian leader.
The unique element in the Kargil affair was that Pakistan and India had conducted successful nuclear tests the year before. With both countries holding aces in their hands, certainly the nature of conventional warfare must have changed as well.
People fight wars, but they move on. I think Kargil was a mistake in the sense that we repeated the mistake of 65. Normally we don't repeat old mistakes, but the old mistake was that we thought that we would do something in occupied Kashmir and the Indians would not respond, or the Indian response would not be commensurate with what we had perceived. So I think our understanding or our analysis of the Indian situation is wrong. Here I also find a lot of ignorance on both sides about each other's intentions. Despite being neighbors, despite knowing each other or having claimed to live together before 47, I think as two independent states, I think there's a very big gulf in understanding and information about each other.
I am not going to defend Kargil. Kargil was indefensible. But let us remember that Kargil followed on 1984 Operation Meghdoot. The one Indian Major General suddenly decided that he had seen an opportunity and he was going to use it. So the Pakistani army had moved out, as they did every year, from positions that they occupied in the summer months. During the winter they moved out. This man decided to move his troops in during the winter and took over those posts and then decided to stay. In Kargil, exactly the same thing happened. In Kargil, the posts that had been vacated by the Indian army in the winter were occupied by the Pakistani army.
The stakes are high following the nuclearization of South Asia. As the international forces of authority vehemently pursue the crusade to confine mutually assured destruction, the complex relationship between a nuclear India and a nuclear Pakistan has to be examined.